All right, welcome back to week 14 of the NFL football season. It just concluded this week. Obviously, remember to like, comment, subscribe. That helps us to continue to keep doing this and keep growing. And 2026 is a year about trying to continue to grow this channel. This week, we're going to go over the problems in college football and what we would do about fixing these problems that are going on currently. Best win, worst loss of the entire week. We're going to go over the season award overview, see who's sitting at the top currently and who could potentially snatch it in these weeks coming to end the season. And then we are going to go into the playoff overview, who's in, who's out, and another little exercise of who could potentially sneak in as well. And then we're going to go in the weekly Eagles check because Noah's an Eagles fan and they just continue to absolutely crumble, and it's hilarious to watch. And then we're going to go into who had the worst season of in the NFL, and I'm going to tell you why it was the Arizona Cardinals. I do want to start with what's currently going on in college football because it feels like finally college football is getting its voice and buzz in the media and that it really rightfully deserves. That it should be getting this sort of this importance, this culture and cultural importance that it has like in America, and people are starting to talk about it. But right now, it feels like all of the great things of college football like are great, but it feels like that we're talking about college football currently for all the wrong reasons. And I broke down, I'm going to bring Noah in here as well later on today to continue this conversation, but I broke down a few things here, the four main pillars of why I think college football is in such a bad place currently, because in my opinion, it's an absolute disaster and borderline dumpster fire. I want to start with the college football playoff committee. This committee just operates based off vibes. It's all based off feel. There's no accountability for the mistakes that they make year in and year out, in the past, in the future, in the present. There just feels like to be no accountability taken by this committee. And I just feel like if there's no real formula that's put in place to make this happen, you need to continue to I'm not saying it's going to be perfect right away, but you need to continue to refine this formula, figure it out, what works, what doesn't, and continue to make this a better overall committee rather than just feeling like year after year just doing the same exact thing. And the answer to this is not adding in more teams to the college football playoff. Please don't do that. Because at some point, the college football playoff will almost become meaningless, where it felt like it was this elite tier that you had to get to and reach to finally get over the hump and make it happen. And now it's just like, if you're just going to continue to let more and more teams in to quote unquote figure this out, at some point, it's going to become somewhat meaningless. Next, the NIL era is an absolute train wreck. There needs to be a true salary cap in college football for these rosters. And that allows, I know that right now, this is the NIL era has allowed some teams that have never been good to be able to spend money and be good, like in Indiana, for example. But if you were able to salary cap all the teams across the country, then that even gives more opportunities for guys to create really good rosters and bring people in, but like be capped at a certain amount and not just hand out money to these people, to these kids, excuse me, not these people, to just come in and be on their team for a year and then potentially dip or not play in the bowl game or do whatever. Um, the second part of this is these players need real contracts. There needs to be real structure within these contracts. Obviously, I think brand deals, social media ads, commercials, all of that stuff separate. And if you have some sort of massive superstar enigma about you and you're able to go and grab like these brand deals and do so post on social media, post a story on social media and get 100K, you should be allowed to do that all the time. I'm not arguing that point. What I'm arguing is that the money that's being funneled into these kids' pockets from like donors, from school, whoever it may be, if you're doing that and that money is coming from the school, there needs to be real guidelines placed, such as like maybe like an incentive based contract where if you reach a certain point, you win a certain amount of games, you play a certain amount of games, even. And I feel like just going based off vibes, and if a kid's like, oh, I don't want to play anymore, he still has all that money, and you're just kind of like dumping money away at a point. And I just feel like if you're investing in somebody for that amount of money, I feel like there also needs to be some sort of commitment on paper that you also get out of it as well. Obviously, if you're not holding up on your end of the bargain, it could change. But like the same thing in the NFL. If you go somewhere and you sign a 3-year contract, you are obligated to carry out that 3-year contract and figure that out. And I understand that college football is a more basis year to year because or 2 to 3 years because kids could potentially leave early for the draft. But what if you sign somebody to a 3-year contract and it could be like contingent on like if you leave for the draft or stay or whatever that may be? Something to think about. But I do think that there needs to be some more guidelines in this NIL era. Next, the timeline of the college football season and the overlap that it has with the transfer portal and the coaching carousel, to not allow that to be its own entity, storyline, coverage. I think about like what the NFL does. The NFL has year-round coverage because of everything that goes on. It has the season. We then go into the offseason. Then we go into the draft cycle, NFL draft, free agency, the draft itself, training camp. It's just a year-round process, and they dominate that year-round process. What college football does is at the end of the season, when the games are supposed to matter most, these championship games, et cetera, getting ready for the college football playoff, there are players, coaches that have to make tough decisions because of the timeline that they are given. It's not fair. It I look at for an example, um, excuse me, I'll get to that next. It's time to differentiate the difference between the college football season and the transfer portal, which I view as like the free agency period, and the coaching cycle to match during this off-season period, so the seasons stay the seasons and there's no overlap. That's what I just said about the NFL. The NFL is broken down into multiple seasons. The season itself, the off season is an entire thing in itself, and then the preseason. They do a great job of that. That's what college football should strive to do. That's a model that works. It's worked forever, and it's never going away. So let's figure out a way to figure that out. This next point builds on top of it because this is where I think that another problem stems from. And what's important right now in college football, because we have Ole Miss, who's in the college football playoff, who had an amazing season, where Lane Kiffin has to interview for a job at LSU because that's what he's forced to do. That's the timeline that he is forced to decide on. It's not anybody else's fault. It's not the school's fault. It's not his fault. It's not anybody. Was it messy? Sure, whatever. Who cares? That's business. But he shouldn't even have to be in that scenario at all. He should be able to finish out this season without thought of like, I don't have to worry about interviewing for the LSU job. I know that there's like a little bit of that in the NFL where some guys are like coaching on playoff teams and they have to take an interview during like a playoff stretch or whatever that might be. But I don't like that. The fact that as soon as that's done, like as soon as that happens in college football, it's like, nope, screw you. The college fan base doesn't want anything to do with you. The boosters don't want anything to do with you. The school doesn't want anything to do with you. The AD doesn't want anything to do with you. If you aren't able to understand that this is business, then you need to separate this to make it happen after the season. Because now, Ole Miss, we're almost like robbed of a team that could potentially have made noise in the college football playoff, and they still might, but they had a much better chance with Lane Kiffin at the helm to potentially make this run in the college football playoff, and it hurts to watch. And now the story that happened this week is the Notre Dame story. Marcus Freeman opts out of playing a bowl game because they were left out of the college football playoff. Now this just leads you, well, I just said it at the top, what's important? Lane Kiffin's got a team that he has built the last 5 years make the college football playoff, succeed, and he leaves. You have Marcus Freeman, who just had an incredible season at Notre Dame, has an opportunity to play in one of the bigger bowls, not the college football playoff, but a bigger bowl and play against a good team. And he's like, nope, we're not playing anymore. And there's no repercussions for it. So that enforces this point even more is like, what's the point of having these bowl games that are outside of the college football playoff if the biggest teams are just going to stomp their feet and not play in them if they feel like they were rightfully stripped or unrightfully stripped of their opportunity to play in the college football playoff from a committee who just goes based off vibes? Then they can just do whatever they want. The whole thing is rogue and it needs to be fixed. I don't disagree that there should be bowl games to a point, but the Tax Slayer Bowl, the Pinstripe Bowl, whatever, all these bowls, they're cool. But at the end of the day, if your top players are going to sit out, if guys are going to just choose and pick who wants to play, if the coach isn't going to even be there, what the new coach that you have just hired isn't allowed to coach yet, so you have the interim head coach in there, it's an absolute mess. And I'm going to bring Noah in to continue to talk a little bit more about that, but we're going to try to figure out what's wrong with college football. You missed it, but in the intro, we're going to start out with what's going on and the issues currently with college football, what's going on. So I do want to ask you, the first question I want to ask you is number one, what do you think your personal number one draft pick overall, the biggest problem with college football right now? And before you answer it, I will give you my 4 pillars. And if you need me to elaborate on any of them, I will gladly do it. My 4 pillars of what I think the biggest issues are currently with college football. 1, I have the college football playoff committee. 2, I have the NIL era is a mess.
Okay. So we've got the college football playoff committee, the NIL era.
And yeah, the NIL era is a mess. 3, timelines need to be more definitive in college football. And 4, what's important. And that one is a little open-ended, but I say that because as of right now, and I said this in the intro, like we are in an era of like college football where we have Lane Kiffin, who started building up an Ole Miss team for 5 years he was there. They finally get to a point where they're 6th in the college football playoff rankings. That could be that we could be potentially seeing that team make a run or not make a run, whatever. But to see somebody just jump ship, it's just like, okay, like if he can't win at Ole Miss, like, does it not matter? He needs to go do it at LSU. And the other reason why I said this, Matt, what's important, is the Notre Dame situation with Marcus Freeman, where they don't get in the college football playoff. They will be playing a good team, though. No matter what, they'll be playing in one of like the higher end bowls, and they pretty much just like stomp their feet, go home, and it's just like, okay, well, we have a coach that made a business decision, obviously, but it's just like, what's important in college football? Because is the college football playoff not that important to leave a team that you've had so much success with? And then on the other side of things, me and you've had countless conversations about these bowl games and how could they get fixed. And it's like, well, they really don't matter because any team and any player could just pretty much pull out at any single time without any sort of ramification for it. And I think those are my 4 pillars of what's currently wrong. So do you have a different one for your 1-1, or are any of those issues your current 1-1 with your biggest problems in college football?
So I talk about this one specifically with my dad a lot. We talk about Penn State and then just the overall landscape of college football. And the one thing that is continual and one thing that I think at the end of the day, like, keeps coming back to me as like my biggest issue, I think it's the timeline of the transfer portal and for when coaches leave their respective schools and head elsewhere. I think that's my overall biggest issue with college football currently.
So that was what I meant. Number 3, I put timelines need to be more definitive in college football.
Yeah, that's my number one.
And I use this example where you look at the NFL. The NFL has found a way to dominate all 4 quarters of the year, where they have the Super Bowl at the top of the year, then you go into the offseason, then you have the draft cycle, then the preseason camps, hard
Yeah.
knocks, all of that fun stuff starts. The content's literally out of this world. Then you have the season itself, and then obviously we have that like big cycle, but they just don't miss out on anything. And one thing that I feel like college football really misses out on with this issue is that we could treat this transfer portal era as like a free agency period, and the coaching carousel thing. Like, I understand that there's might be a little bit of overlap. There is some overlap in the NFL as well, but it just feels so different. And I think that if there were is a way where teams and everybody can, I think that there was a report that everybody was okay with Lane Kiffin potentially. Well, LSU was okay with Lane Kiffin coaching out Ole Miss, but Ole Miss pretty much said go pound sand. That just shouldn't happen. Like that scenario right there shouldn't happen. We potentially got robbed of what could have been in like an LSU or an Ole Miss playoff run. So that's where I feel like they should capitalize on having this stuff going on, because it's content, it's talking points, and now now it's getting spoken on. It could get spoken on in a positive manner, but right now it just gets talked about in like a negative manner on all accounts, pretty much.
Yeah, and I have like 3 points about that whole like Lane Kiffin situation. Um, First point is uh the time, like I said earlier, like my biggest thing is this timeline. If the timeline was different, then there wouldn't have been an issue with Lane having to make that decision to leave Ole Miss to go to LSU before the end of the season was over. Second thing is, um, I don't blame LSU for not wanting, or excuse me, I don't blame Ole Miss for not wanting Lane to be the coach through their playoff run. I totally understand that they feel probably slighted about the entire thing, where they had their best season in however many years, and now he's jumping ship to go to LSU. Um, I think that uh, I think that because of the level of programs that they are, LSU is much bigger than Ole Miss, but like they both are in Power Five. And then I believe so. It's a little bit different with this next scenario, but I believe that the Tulane coach John Sumrall is coaching Tulane throughout their bowl run, and Florida is more than okay with that because
Mhm.
they are they are understanding of this process, and they probably think similarly to us, where it's this timeline is messed up, and we know the amount of hard work that it took for Tulane and those players to get to that point, and that's a once in a lifetime opportunity for Tulane potentially. So I understand. I like how Florida and Tulane have been civil about this. And then lastly is plays into the college football playoff committee part of it, which I'm sure we'll get into more in depth. But um, why is I understand that Lane Kiffin wasn't a player and he's not out there on the field per se, like in every down, but Florida State a few years ago was punished for their quarterback being hurt, and they were left out of the college football playoff for not having a starting quarterback. Was there ever a consideration for leaving an Ole Miss team out of this because they lost their head coach, or is it just pick and choose how you're feeling based off of the year for the college football committee?
Yeah, I that's a great point. It reels into what I said like earlier, like on the intro. They operate based just strictly off vibes. It feels like it's a vibe based feel where this might mean something for one person, but it might not mean something for the other. And there's no ramifications. There's just no like real blowback. It feels like I guess some people get like a little annoyed with it on Twitter, or like Notre Dame sits out of a bowl game or whatever, which is, when you think about it, it's crazy because it's like that's one of the most important brands in college football with a very like strong fan base, like to just have something like that just go away is like what you got to keep those relationships like mended at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I don't understand what the college football playoff committee uses as a formula to dictate who these teams are. And the thing that I hate that I've been hearing lately is it's always just like, oh, like we'll just make it bigger. Okay, well,
I
if you make
know.
it bigger, then like it's gonna start to become meaningless to make the college football playoff. Where it felt like a few years ago, if you made the college football playoff, you were in this like elite tier of like a program that like only a few ever got to like taste. And now is like you just like dilute the field more and more. It's just like, well, at what point does this just like really not mean that much anymore, making college football playoff? And I feel like adding more teams would definitely do that. So I would be an advocate to not do that.
I am an advocate of making it smaller
Yeah,
because
I think so too.
you look at it right now, and obviously no disrespect to a Tulane or to a James Madison. They had great seasons, but those teams are like, and obviously anything can happen, but the likelihood of those teams pulling off an upset against an Oregon or against maybe Ole Miss, I mean, who knows? Without a coach, things get different. But like those two teams are gonna just likely be one and done. And it's great that they got there. Obviously, like hang your hat on a good season. Congratulations. And there should be recognition and there should be something deserving for those teams. But it's just a different level when you're going up against the big dogs.
Well,
The big dogs like this.
I have an idea. Win the championship game, your conference championship game. That means something. And then
Agreed.
go and win one of the big bowls. And that
I
means
know.
something too. Just like it used
Yeah.
to means like back in the day, not even back in the day, 5, 6, 7 years ago, however long it has been. Like that's like where it's like, what's important now at this point? Because you hit it right on the head. You're like, well, it would be nice to be able to like figure out a way that these teams could like get some sort of recognition. It's like, well, it's the college football as a whole that has stripped this down to the studs where like everything pretty much means nothing unless if you somehow win that college football playoff championship. And if you don't do that, then like pretty much every other thing, including now the conference championship, like the Big Ten championship, whatever, is now essentially meaningless, quote unquote, for these games.
I mean, one of the conference championships this past weekend was essentially pointless because neither one of those teams are in the college football playoffs as it stands. It was a great game. I loved watching it, but Virginia and Duke, neither one of those teams are college football playoff teams. And yeah, that's great for Duke, a team that probably shouldn't have even been in the conference championship to begin with at 8-5, had a chance, or 7-5, had a chance to win the ACC, and that's great for them. What the flip side of this is like there needs to be automatic bids, I think, for conference champions. And the automatic bid piece of it kind of goes back to like a restructuring of how the conferences are as far as like the conference schedule piece of it goes, because the reason that Duke was able to play in that conference championship was just like the most random statistical anomaly where them and Georgia Tech, I think, only had 2 common opponents, and Duke so happened to beat both of them or something along those lines. I don't know exactly how it happened off the top of my head, but it was something along the lines of like a similar opponent between them and a bunch of other teams, and Duke was the one that ended up winning. And so they were the second place team and played Virginia in the conference championship.
Okay, but we're also sitting here where we have UVA who was 10-3.
Yes.
We have University of Miami who is 10-2, and we have Georgia Tech that was 9-3. Why does it get to a point where you allow it to go based off of like quote unquote like statistical anomalies And why at some point doesn't it just go based off of, okay, Pitt was 4 and, or I'm looking at their conference, like their record in the conference, let's say. Like UVA
Yeah.
was 7-1 in the conference and 10-3 overall. Like at what point do you just have the best teams like play each other who perform the best throughout the course of the season? Why, how does that even happen is where I'm kind of confused.
And that's how that I don't know, because what needs to happen is you should play every team in your conference is how I look at it, or figure
That
out.
wouldn't be possible, correct?
No, it wouldn't,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
there's too many teams in these conferences. But
Yeah.
like that's how the NFL does it. Like you play each team in your division twice a year, and that gives you a pretty clear cut picture of who's going to be who's going to win that division. So they need to implement something like that.
Or if they're not able to play all the teams in the division, instead of playing like, I don't know, let's just for like fun, like let's just look at like the University of Miami's like schedule here. And I understand that they're gonna have to play like some different teams every now and again, but they played, I don't even know what this school is. It's B-CU. They
I got it. I've got
45-3.
Bethune-Cookman. They beat 45 to 3.
Like we could probably take that game off the schedule and add like what, like Virginia Tech or like
another AC. Yeah,
another
Virginia
ACC
Tech is
school.
actually on their schedule, but yes, another ACC school should have been added instead of a Bethune-Cookman. South Florida probably should be removed as well.
So I definitely understand where you're coming from with that. Like stack up your conference opponents like a little more if you're just going to be playing some of these cupcakes. Yeah, I don't know, either that or I don't know what really has to happen. But like obviously, like the thing that I hated the most about all of this is like the reporter after the game, like talking to Manny Diaz, like give your case to the college football playoff and why you guys should be in. It's like you have 5 losses. Like the fact that you're sitting there, like actually being like this is a tough team, like, but, and I get it, like he has to play that character to a point, but at some point, like we shouldn't even allow like the reporter to look at Manny Diaz and be like, oh, like tell us why you should be in the college football playoff, because there's a 0% chance that you're going to make it. So that's another thing that like kind of bugs me a little bit.
And I will say, like, I was rooting for Duke. Like, I wanted chaos in the small instance that they were to, like, I was rooting for them to win. I wasn't sure how it would pan out. And the odds of them making the college football playoff, even at winning, were like less than 0.1%. But I was rooting for that out of strictly chaos, because I want, in hopes of maybe the committee realizing how stupid this entire process, the decision-making process is on their end, where yes, they did win their conference championship, but putting a 8-5 loss team in over a handful of other teams is just so ridiculous. And I wanted to see if they would do it. And they obviously didn't, but which thank God, because that would have been, we would have been sitting here looking at the matchups for whoever Duke was playing, and it would have been a similar line probably to what we are currently looking at for James Madison, Oregon, or Tulane and Ole Miss. Like, those are 2 games where it's over a 3.5 score spread, 2.5 score spread, excuse me.
That should never happen. And like you said, maybe condense a little bit and have those teams that probably like wouldn't have made it per se and put them at the top. But like if it was like a 4-team like college football playoff currently, like to see like, I don't know, or a 6-team, whatever it might be, like to see like Indiana just like consensusly like grabbing that 1 spot because they go and they beat like an Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, like that game, then like everybody in the world would have watched the Indiana Ohio State Big Ten championship game. But instead, no, I didn't pay too much attention to it. It was like on my side screen and I like looked over now and then. But I wasn't, there was a real there was no real implications of like what could have potentially made that game like extremely special and like a spectacle to watch.
The only like both of those teams were going to make it no matter what. The only like storyline incentive for watching it was seeing if this Indiana team could pull off a win against Ohio State, which hasn't been a thing in how long, and a team in
Forever.
Indiana where Kurt Signetti gets there and completely turns around that entire program in 2 years. Like I watched it because I wanted to see if they could pull it off, but I can understand how people would not be as dialed in because no matter what, both of those teams are making it.
100%. One last thing before we get into like how we could maybe potentially fix this if ever. I think that this NIL era currently is like really a train wreck. For a few reasons. I'm like we've gotten information about like there has been like some wide receivers who should have never even seen, who never saw the field at Penn State getting paid like $500,000 like confirmation. And that's probably happening at schools all across the country. So really what I want, one, I think there's a difference. If you are a star, if you're if you're a good looking dude who's on the football team who like has like fucking 50,000 Instagram followers and you're on the football team, but you get no tick, but you can like Tate Martell, but you can go and grab like a brand
Abercrombie and Fitch deal.
Yeah, if you want to go and grab a brand deal and do that, like there's nothing wrong with that. But from like the actual money that's being put in by like boosters, investors, whoever, like there needs to be some sort of structure and salary cap so teams aren't just willy-nilly giving everybody money, because I just think that that's absolutely ridiculous. And on top of that, and then you can go ahead, is like there's no like real guidelines or anything like that. Like, okay, that's fine. What if you do pay a wide receiver 500 grand for the course of the season? Why pay him up front? Why not pay him a portion of that 500 grand up front? Like that is like quote unquote guaranteed money, like just how like they do in the NFL. And then on the back end, if they hit certain goals or certain like milestones like throughout the course of the contract, then oh hey, here's a $25,000 bonus for getting to like 50 catches in the season or something like that, whatever it might be. That is the structure that should be implemented with these kids, because right now you're just giving them money with no real guidelines, nothing that's going on, and everybody's like, oh, they're professionals, like you need to get treated like a professional. Well, I agree, but we've gone way too far the other way, and they're not getting treated like professionals at all. They're just getting given money. So if you want to act like they're professionals, then treat them like professionals and put everybody under a real contract, and then put a real salary cap on what certain teams can spend.
So my only pushback on anything you said was this. I think that it is up to the team. If the head coach is given, let's just say $30 million to put together a roster, I think it's the coaches or the GM or a combination of both for them to figure out how they want to divvy up the money. If that's their budget and that's what they get to work with, that's fine. I think it's an error on the coach's part and the GM's part if they want to give $500,000 to a wide receiver that has 3 catches. That's just poor money management on the team side of things, and that's their own fault. If I'm a player that knows that he's not deserving of that much money, and my head coach and GM comes to me and says, hey, out of this $30 million, we want to give you 500,000 of it. Who am I to say no? That's just complete monetary mismanagement on the team's front of it. So that's my only pushback on that. Well, I completely agree. Though? Because that player, I thought you said that player who only had 3 catches or however, like wasn't really a that good of a player, being given that much money is an issue.
I mean, it's not an issue. Like if that's the direction that you go, then that is, like you said, that's a blunder. That's an error that you would
Yeah.
have to deal
Okay.
with. But in a non-salary cap money ball situation where that 500 grand might not mean anything in the grand scheme of things, like then it doesn't really matter that you gave him 500 grand. Because then at that point you're just like, oh, all right, like fuck it, we get 500 grand from this person too. Like,
Yeah.
but if you have like a hard set cap, you're like, well, we can't give that guy 500 grand. It makes no sense.
Yes. So yeah, okay, so then I might have misinterpreted it. But either way, I agree with you with everything else that you said. There needs to be some type of salary cap. Every team, and I know that certain programs haven't gotten there yet, but every team should have a GM. These kids need to be signing contracts, and that is a way to just sort of begin to put a structure around some of this, because we're eventually, and I saw this happen the other day, we're eventually going to get to a point where these schools are giving these kids X of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and these kids are going to leave and they're going to transfer. And this just happened. Kid from Georgia or Missouri transferred to another school, and now that he's gone, that school that he left is filing for suing or grievances, something along those lines, for $350,000 because that kid left school and they want the money back. So, and there's just no structure around it. There needs to be some type of contract signed between the kid and the school for these NIL deals. And I think that is the first step of kind of putting some framework and groundwork around a situation that is just completely a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, I have it on good authority that like Drew Aller was getting paid like $6 million. Like in a salary cap structure, like the collective is not going to be like, yep, it really makes a ton of sense to pay a guy who is not top 20 in his position $6 million. Also, at the same time, like Sam Levitt is going to be leaving Arizona State just strictly because he's going to go and make $10 million at the University of Miami. So like that's where he's going to school. Like if you guys don't know that's where he's going to school and you think he's going to go somewhere else, you're wrong. He's going to the University of Miami.
They need a quarterback, and he's a pretty good one. So
and they're going to give him more money than anybody else in the country. Yep. So it's just, yes, they need to figure this out bad. My last question, and then we can continue to move on, is just like how do we fix this? And I think you've alluded to it heavily already. Is like one, I think we, in answering everything, I think we alluded to this bigger answer. But one thing that we didn't really talk about is there needs to be a commissioner of college football. There needs to be a guy who like governs the rules on every single level. That's not the NCAA, that can handle it. And it needs to be an entire thing, and it needs to be taken serious. The other thing that you said, I think that was a really good point, is every single college should have a GM. I mean, Appalachian State has a GM of their football program, and that's Chris Greer's son, Landon. Like, everyone should have that. And then I do think that like the last thing is with this contract, and then I want to say one thing about the contracts. Like, I know it's going to be hard to sit here and be like, oh, like let's sign this kid to a 3-year contract, but at some point there needs to be like some stipulations like within the contract. Like, for example, like if you were to sign, like if you personally were to sign with James Franklin at Virginia Tech for different example, you were going to sign with Matt Campbell at Penn State for 3 years to play wide receiver, and you think that that's going to be the coach, and let's just say year one was a disaster, they win 3 games, they can him, and he's done. That should be a clause in the contract where it's like, okay, 100%. If the coach is gone and this is how it works out, then like this is what it is, and you can leave at that point. Or we go back to the era of, if you do want to leave a school and you're under contract, then you need to sit out for a year. Like that was the most clear cut, correct decision, like of what to do. And like looking back on that now, it just made all too much sense. And getting rid of that has like made this way too roster shifty, weird, like there's no like there's legitimately like no tradition anymore. You never know who's going to be on a team year in and year out.
Yeah.
Like when like 5 years ago, you knew a quarterback for like 2-3 years while he was there and he built himself up. And now it's just like a crapshoot every single season. I don't like that. And I don't think anybody really likes that because I just don't think that's what's best for business.
I go back and forth. I go back and forth with this a lot because this is another thing that me and my dad talk about a lot is the amount of times the amount of times you get to transfer. And my pushback on he's like you should be able to transfer one time,
no penalty,
and then if your coach is fired or
you can
move somewhere else, then you get another transfer no charge as well. What you just said. And my only like pushback on this is
that's a good idea.
Yeah. And
because but if you were then real quick and then you can go, but if you were to transfer with like just because, then you would have to like the second time that you're transferring to a different school, or if you're trying to transfer and the coach didn't get fired, then you would have to sit out that year penalty, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. There's a penalty of sitting out a year if you are transferring for a second time for no reason.
Well, I love this idea.
For not the previous reasons. But
this is a great idea.
My only pushback on this when I talk with him about it is that we haven't gotten to the point where the extremely impactful players in college football are transferring to a new school every year. And maybe we do get to that point, but I think it is probably best if we avoid that at all costs. Because I kind of think about it this way, like it's almost trending that way for Sam Levitt with what we talked about earlier, where yes, he's an impactful player, but is this his second time transferring? Was he at Michigan State before he went to Arizona State? I don't think he started. I don't think he started at Arizona State, but I look at it this way as like it'd be different for me if like a guy like Diego Pavia had one really good year at Vanderbilt and was like, screw it, I'm out of here, and then had another really good year and went to, let's just say, Ole Miss, and because he could get more money, and then he's like, oh great, cool, I had another really good year, but I can't go to the draft yet, and Miami's knocking on my door and wants to give me even more money. Like that is the issue that we're setting ourselves up for long term if you don't incorporate some type of penalty for transferring multiple times. And I guess I'm just being nearsighted on it because what I was saying is the guys that are some of the more impactful players in college football aren't necessarily the ones that are transferring 3 and 4 times throughout their college career. And my one example that I think of is like that quarterback from Georgia where it's like, yeah, he was at Georgia, then he transferred to a lesser school, then he transferred to a lesser school and a lesser school. And the Tate Martell example too, where he started at Ohio State and then he left there, went to UNL or Miami and then went to UNLV. And it's like, okay, like, does it really matter that a guy like that is transferring down in competition rather than going from high level to high level?
Well, yeah,
and I think you have to eliminate that at some point.
But you can sit here and make the argument, like you look at what's happening at Alabama right now with their quarterback, where what's his name again? Remind me of it.
Ty Simpson,
where he stuck it out at Alabama. Yeah. And he is now having a successful season. Now he might be a first round pick. Like what happens if Tate Martell, instead of being an idiot, a guy who wasn't able to sit still, and a guy who thought that he was more valuable than what he was and thought that he'd go to a different school and start and got beat out time and time again? What if he just stayed put at Ohio State? And what if he just was like, and then he got to start his junior year or senior year and got to ball out, but had that infrastructure there, especially when he was there? I mean, look at the quarterbacks that were on the roster when he was there. Like, you just don't know. So I do think that you can look at an example of that like that and like be like, this is worst case scenario. Like, this
Yeah.
is a reason why you should stay at a university, because if I get it, you guys want to play right away, but not everybody has
Yeah.
the same path. And you might not have the same path as the guy in front of you, but you might get that. You might start your junior and senior year, and guess what? You could still make it to the NFL if you start as a junior and senior and go out your senior year. So it's just like that. That could be viewed as, like I said, as a situation that could be negative. Is really what I view it as.
Yeah, and I think the point that I was trying to argue was trying to like talk from is a significantly lesser issue than the alternative of a guy like Diego Pavia being one of the best players in college football, just jumping from school to school 3 different years. I think that is significantly more harmful to this sport than a guy transferring from Georgia uh, to Rice to UTSA, right? Like that is you want to avoid that, but you can't like pick and choose necessarily what battles you want to win when it comes to like making sure that there is guidelines to the transfer portal. And if the overall point of it is we can't let this get to a high level guy just going to a different school because they'll pay him more than the previous school, then I think that you have to put guidelines in place to avoid that rather than some guy transferring after a year and going playing somewhere lesser just because he wants to play.
Yeah, and I listen. I understand that you're really gonna want to play, and everybody's gonna want to play, and you think that you can. You obviously think that you can play at that elite level, so you want to go improve it, but you just never know. Like I said, your possibility and your route that you could take in college football. So, I think having a governing body to kind of put like I just can't imagine like the people in these when I was 18 to 20. I mean, shit, I'm about to be 29 at the end of the month. I'm a fucking idiot now. When I was 18 to 22, I was a complete idiot. So like thinking about like the people who are in their ears, like agents, family, friends, all these people, like I'm gonna just say that like yes, there needs to be a higher body governing all of this just for everybody's own sake. And it might not always be the right answer for them, but somebody has to protect everybody from themselves at some point. And I think that it's gone too far. I think everybody's starting to kind of realize that now. We've talked about it for years, but now it feels it's getting to like maybe like a little bit of a tipping point because college football now is getting talked about more than ever, and it should be because it's fun to watch and it's great, but it's getting talked about in a negative light when it should be getting spoken about in a positive light. So that's really all there is to that.
Yeah, and until they begin to structure it differently and put more guidelines and more structure to it, it's just going to continue to go off the rails. And as more and more money begins to funnel into the sport, the sooner and sooner these things need to get figured out. Otherwise, it's just going to be an absolute like it's. We think it's a madhouse now. I saw a tweet the other day about how Utah is considering a $500 million deal with private equity, and if that happens, then this entire thing is cooked. So
Yeah,
having
literally.
a having a GM in or having a commissioner for for all of college football has to happen. I mean, we're not quite at the point of this being like the NFL, but it's probably like the minor leagues, right? Like these guys are getting paid good sums of money and there's no contracts and there's no like anything around it. And imagine if the NFL was that way. It would just be a mess.
Yeah, it should be treated like like I said, maybe not the NFL, but it needs to be treated like an actual league with real guidelines. So I'm right there with you on that. It's definitely time to make that jump.
I had one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and it was all the way back to the college football committee that I didn't get to throw in there when we were first going over it is why did every team that played in their conference championship that lost besides Alabama fell in the college football rankings, and Alabama was the only one who stayed in the same place, and they got dog walked by Georgia on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you saw what Adam said. Adam was like, "Yeah, like it doesn't matter if Alabama loses. It's not like that they're going to go out there and lose by 3 touchdowns, and then they go and lose by 3 touchdowns. Like
They had 4 rushing yards.
yeah, it was bad.
I haven't decided. Like, you should have somewhat of a penalty for losing in your conference championship. It shouldn't just be you stay in the same spot. I'm sorry.
Well, they go based off vibes. We covered.
They do.
We said that. We
They do.
said that best, and they clearly had Alabama in there no matter what.
I just spit it. Good girl, we're getting paper as a passion. Collect